Howdy folks, Ed here. Welcome back to Bullnose Garage for part 2 of the Bullnose Brake Job special. Today we're going to be going through the rear brakes, replacing all of the brake hardware, putting on the new painted drums, adding new brake shoes, and we're going to be cleaning up this hub. I got this wheel hub resurfacing kit here we're going to be using to get this all nice and clean. And then once that's clean, we're actually going to paint it to hopefully prevent rust in the future. And then once all that's done, we're going to go to the other side and do the same thing. And on the other side, I have to replace the parking brake cable. So lots in store for today. Stick around.
Hello.
I'm going to start by taking off all the brake hardware and the brake shoes so I can get back in here, clean this stuff up, and then prep this hub for cleaning and paint. Now to do that, I went out and got this spring compressor and I got these spring pliers. Now you can do this with a screwdriver, a wrench, and a pair of vice grips. As a matter of fact, Chris Fix has an excellent video on how to do just that. But I've done this before that way, and I'm not Chris Fix. I get frustrated really easy. So in order to keep my blood pressure down and keep my doctor happy, I went out and sprung for these tools. They're not that expensive and they're gonna make my life a whole lot easier. Now that I've got this mostly cleaned up, I'm just going to hit it with a little bit of rust dissolver just to try to get it cleaned up that little bit more and get some of this rust off. Now that I've got this thing about as clean as I'm going to get it, I'm going to go ahead and use this wheel hub resurfacing kit to do the actual hub itself here, because I'm actually going to paint this. And this is pretty simple. It's just a piece that goes into your drill, and then this sanding end screws on like that. It's got a hole in the center so you can go over top of your lugs. I was having a hard time keeping this from rolling around while I was working on it, so I just put some bungees on here and wrapped them around one of the bolts back here for the leaf springs just to keep it from turning while I'm trying to grind on it. If I sound a little strange because I'm using a face shield, you always want to wear some kind of eye protection whenever you're using a wire brush like this, because these little wires can come flying off, and get one of those into your eye, you're having a real bad day. I'm just going to do one final shot of brake cleaner on this just to make sure it's completely clean. Just like with the drums and the calipers, I'll be using high heat primer and high heat paint because these hubs could potentially get a little warm. Now it's time for paint, same kind of stuff, high heat, matte black. If you watched my last video, then this should look familiar. All I'm going to do is put some rust remover on these parts here. These are parts that you don't really replace. You just kind of clean them up. This is your strut, parking brake lever, little brake guide, the brake cylinder pins, and then these are the nuts that hold the brake cylinder on. So since I got them out, I may as well clean them up. And so that's what I'm going to do. Here are my parts all de-rusted and ready for paint. Just like in the last episode, I'm going to go ahead and paint these parts just to prevent them from rusting in the future. I'm just about ready to start putting this thing back together. As you can see, I've laid all my parts out here on the ground in about the same location that they're going to go up here on the wheel. I got a brake hardware kit for this. Came with all the springs and a lot of the hardware you see here. The stuff that I painted is stuff that came off of the truck originally. You don't get those with the kit. And also I had to go out and get the self-adjuster and the parts for that. That didn't come with the kit as well. Most of these hardware kits come with almost everything you're going to need. I did not know if this hardware kit came with a strut spring, and it did. But because I didn't know if it did or not, I went out and got my own strut springs. And these are the ones that I'm going to use because they actually match much closer to what came off the truck in the first place. I went out and printed off a paper with the names of all the parts and where they go. And I've also got some pictures of the other side of the truck, just as reference, because while putting this together isn't too hard, there's a lot of parts and they all need to go in the exact right spot. So it can be a little complicated. And I don't do this a whole lot. I've done it once before. It was kind of a pain in the butt. And if you don't do it all the time, it's easy to forget where all the parts go. So it's always good to have a reference to know what you're doing. So with all that out of the way, I'm ready to get going on this. I'll move you guys off to the side so I can get in here and start putting it back together. Okay, well, here we go. This is the moment of truth right here. Oh. Dude, this thing is such an utterly humongous pain in the ass. I can't even. Oh, come on. Crying out loud. I don't get it. You son of kind of bullshit. Oh, son of a pain in the ass. Oh my God. What an unbelievable pain in the ass. How the is this supposed to go in? Oh, this cord. That's this shit, man. There's no way. How does that? What the hell? All right. Calm it down. Calm it down. Come on. There we go. Come on, you little bastard. Oh, these springs like work against you. Ah, oh, you. This spring. Scary. Come on. Ah, that can't be right. Come on, you. Come on. Come on. Ha! I probably forgot something. I forgot this, which goes behind those. So I gotta take them both out. Come on, you son of a... How in the hell is this supposed to work? I don't get how that's supposed to work. Oh, you son of a... There we go. I've already done a whole lot of work and a lot of cussing and swearing on the other side of the truck. And the reason that I did the entire of one side first and then came over here to do this side is so that, one, I've always got an assembled brake system to look at, so that even if my diagrams or my images fail me, I can always come over here and look at this side to make sure I can see what's going on and replicate it if I have to. And number two is because I haven't done this in a while, and I did a lot of learning as I went. So to spare you guys from me bumbling around when I'm trying to explain how this is done, I did one side to familiarize myself, and now I can do this side much more quickly and efficiently and actually film the process with some explanation so that you know exactly what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, with as little cussing as possible, which may still be quite a bit. But we'll see. So let's get to it. The first thing I'm going to do is remove these two springs. There's one here and one here. And to do that, I'm going to use this nifty little spring pliers tool. And the way that that works is that this little end here wraps around the spring end, and you twist it and it pulls the spring off. It's actually a lot easier to show you than to explain. There we go. Takes a little bit of elbow grease to pull it, but this is a whole lot easier than using a pair of vice grips or a screwdriver. And there's one spring, and now we'll do the other. This one's a little tougher because the spring is tucked back in further, so sometimes it helps to try to pull the spring forward a little bit. There we go. And then there's this little cable guide here that this spring goes through and then into the shoe. It's a little tricky to get out of here. You just kind of have to wiggle it. Just like that. And then you've got the cable that actually connects down underneath here. There's a little hook that goes in. I'll show you in a minute. And then this little piece here comes out. It's just a guide. Save this because the hardware kits don't come with this. Now you can move your shoe out and remove the stud spring and the actual stud itself. Make sure you save this. I'm actually going to clean this up and paint it. Hardware kits don't come with this either. And here I can take out and let you see the brake cylinder pin. Again, the hardware kits don't come with this, so you should probably save it. These, actually for a pair of these, it's like $5, but they don't really break down. They just get a little bit rusty. So I'm just going to clean them up and paint them and put them back. Here's that cable I was talking about. It's hooked in back here. You really still can't see it, but there's a little plate back here that it hooks into. Now I could undo this spring and all this stuff down here, but it's actually easier just to go ahead and take the shoes off at this point. So that's what the spring compressor is for, and these two springs here and here. I don't know if you can see or not, but there's a little, here, you know what? Let's see. There we go. You see how the pin is going up and down, but the hole is going side to side. You got to turn that spring so that the hole lines up with the pin and you can pull it out. Sometimes it takes just a little bit of fiddling. There we go. And these springs and the little caps that come on those springs you can toss because the hardware kit comes with those. And the same with these pins. Oh, that one's actually bent. Wow. Hardware kit comes with new pins. You can toss those. And now that that's all taken apart, the shoes just come right off. And of course, you're going to toss your shoes, toss this spring, toss this plate, let's disconnect our parking brake, and then the last part, which is kind of a pain in the butt, is to get that little pin out of there. And you really just kind of have to work at it. I moved over to the desk so you can kind of see what I'm doing, and so I've got a little bit better spot to work in. The best way to do this is probably with a screwdriver. I'm going to use a pair of vice grips just to keep this from moving around. You don't have to worry about damaging this because you're going to get a new one. And of course, you're going to toss the brake shoe. But you want to keep this piece because the hardware kit does not come with one of these. Now we're going to disconnect the brake cylinder. That's this stuff right here. When you're doing this, you're always going to want to have some kind of a rag or something, because brake fluid is nasty stuff. So a rag, and then also something on the ground to prevent it from getting all over your floor unless you don't care about your floor. The first thing we're going to do is unhook the brake line. You want to make sure that you're using a flare nut wrench for this, because these brake lines can get kind of nasty and corroded, and it's easy to strip the nut trying to wrench on these. And if you do, then you got a real problem with your brake line here. So make sure you use a flare nut wrench to do this. Okay. And I just got the cap from a speed bleeder, or one of my bleeders that I got from my kit, just to put right on the end of this so it doesn't keep leaking. There we go. You want to be careful with these bolts because they can get pretty nasty and corroded. So when you put them back on later, you're going to want to use some anti-seize, but we'll go over that in a minute. Luckily, I live in the Southwest, so rust and corrosion really isn't much of a problem for us down here. Meth, on the other hand, what are you going to do? And you yank it on out of there. Because this is the passenger side and I'm replacing the passenger side parking brake cable, I gotta remove it. So this is where that happens. If you watched my last video, you know how these clips work, but basically you just push these in and yank the whole cable out that way. And the only place where it's actually connected to the chassis in any way was the first one that I've already removed. It was up here, a little, where was it? It was up here, a little bracket, which I'll have to put back when I'm done. But it's also on top of the differential there, you can see a clip. So I've got to get it off of that. So there's a bolt that holds this clip on up here, if I can get on it. It's a 1/2 inch. There we go. Ouch. There we go. Whew. And this here plugs in just like all the others. Ooh, not enough slack. Okay, so after messing around with this thing, I had to take it off. The brake line just clips right into there. It clips really easy, so it was able to come out real easy. This thing is incredibly tight. I mean, you can see when I got it on there that I actually took off some of the outer coating. So I'm going to open this up quite a bit to make it easier and go from there. Well, obviously that's much easier to do outside the truck. I'm a little disappointed that I screwed up my outer jacket, but it is what it is. I just didn't have the mounting position correct. I didn't leave myself enough slack on the one side and thought that I would be able to slide this up and down through here. Obviously, I can't do that. It's way too tight for that. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is get it mounted onto the rear brakes and get it hooked up to the parking brake assembly. And then once it's hooked up, I'll put this back on there and hook it wherever it goes. So I tried to install this, and there's not a big enough gap here to accommodate that piece of metal there, and I'm not exactly sure what's going on. But what I'm going to try to do is bend these tabs out just a little bit more to make some more space. So hopefully that'll fit. And it still won't clip in there. Do you ever get that feeling like nothing's ever easy? The problem that I'm running into is that the space between this tab here and this back part of this mount point here, the space right inside of there, isn't wide enough. And I can't bend this enough to make it wide enough, because as soon as I push this through the hole, they all bend back. So my solution is a Dremel. All right, let's see if that took care of it. Almost, I just got to bend the tabs back out. There we go. All right. Now that I'm pretty much cleaned up back here, the first step to putting it all back together is to plug in my new parking brake cable. And that goes in right there. Just as I did on the driver's side of the truck, on the passenger side, I've laid everything out on the ground in sort of the location that it's going to relatively translate up into there. I've also got a cheat sheet just in case I kind of forget where things go or need a quick reference. Of course, I've also got the other side of the truck already put together and working. In case I have any questions, I can always run over there and take a look. So the first thing that I'm going to do is put my brake cylinder back in. Of course, it goes in the other way. But before you do this, you're going to want to make sure to put some anti-seize on these bolts that hold it in. Because this is part of the undercarriage, a lot of times rust and corrosion can get real bad down here. And these can get pretty nasty. So when they corrode into the actual brake cylinder itself, sometimes they're really hard to get out, and you can actually snap these. Try to see what I'm doing here. As I'm sure I've said before, you want to make sure that when you're putting on this brake line that you use a flare nut wrench. It's kind of a pain to use because it's a little slow, but it will definitely save you a headache in the future if it prevents you from rounding this nut off. I'm just going to leave this rag here for now because I'm going to have to bleed this after I'm done installing everything else. Now that the brake cylinder is installed, the next thing that I'm going to do is put on some brake and caliper grease on these pads right here. You can see these raised portions. That's where the shoe is actually going to ride on this back plate. So you want to make sure that you get some lubrication on there. You want to make sure when you're cleaning this back plate off that you do clean these areas really well. And I tried to clean the whole thing, but I could have gotten away with just cleaning these pads. But you do want to make sure that they at least are clean. Now that we're all greased up, the first thing, first of all, let me say that you're going to get, with most of these, you're going to get two different shoes. One's bigger than the other. The small one goes in front and the big one goes in the back. And that's just the way the brakes work. There's some fancy explanation as to why the back one should be bigger because there's more pressure on it when you're braking. But I don't really know about all that stuff. All I know is that the big one goes in the back. The big one is also where you're going to install your parking brake actuation lever. Goes in that top hole there. And it's got this little clip that slides on. You can do it without busting your knuckles. I think it'd be kind of tight, so I got it pressed on all the way off camera. And but once you got it on there, you just take a pair of pliers and sort of bend these tabs in just to keep it from coming off. Now that you've got your parking brake actuation lever on, you want to hook it up to your parking brake cable. Just like that. Now you're ready to actually install the shoes. And that's what these parts here are for. This pin comes in from the back, like that. The shoe, make sure you get the little hooky thing up here. Pin goes through that hole there. And then this spring and retainer goes onto the pin. So it's kind of hard to do while trying to explain it. So I'm just going to try to get this on here on camera as best I can. There we go. So one of the hardest things about drum brakes is that everything is held on by springs. So you don't really have anything to sort of start with to build on top of. You just have to compress the springs and get it all put together. This thing here is really, really wonky right now because none of these other springs are on here. But as you put the rest of the springs together, it'll sort of hold everything together in tension. So some things to not forget when you're putting this in. Don't forget to put in your brake cylinder pins. And don't forget to put in your parking brake strut. And don't forget to put this guide plate on the top. You also want to make sure that you don't forget on this side here to put in this piece here. That's a guide for this cable here, which you also want to make sure not to forget to put on. And then this longer spring, here's your other top spring. The longer spring goes on the back. It's kind of a pain to get in. It actually was easier than typical. So I'm going to make sure that you got your shoe lined up and everything here is kind of ready to go. And then you can get your tool and you use this long piece here with this little sort of, if I can get it, this little indentation right there. The indentation goes up against this stud here so you can pull the spring on. There we go. And on this side, you've got this little bit beefier spring. It's a little bit shorter. And it goes up into this hole up here. And to get it on, it's the same basic idea as the other side. The trick is getting it on without losing tension and everything else. And there we go. And the bottom of this is also pretty tricky. It involves putting on this adjuster plate, this spring, and this self-adjuster. The self-adjuster is what helps adjust your shoes out as they wear. So because this piece needs to move pretty freely, you want to make sure that you take this apart and put some anti-seize on these threads and on this cap here. This slots right in like this. This plate here hooks into this hole right there, and the adjuster plate rides on top of the self-adjuster. The trick is that you've got to get this cable hooked into here after having come around the guide up top there, so it's kind of tight. And then you also have to get this spring hooked from here into there. Now, this tool that I got is supposed to make that easy. But after messing with it, I find it's a whole lot easier just to use a pair of vice grips. There we go. And that should be a completed drum brake system with new hardware. just do a quick inspection. Make sure all your springs are tight, that your cable is going around the guide, that your clip is in, that your brake cylinder pins are in, that your parking brake strut spring is in correctly, that your, see, there's an inspection issue. My self-adjuster popped out right here. So I've got to redo this bottom part. There we go. Much better. Self-adjuster is in there correctly, and that this wheel is riding just underneath this plate, which is how it does the self-adjustment. Now to adjust the actual brake tension itself with the self-adjuster down here, let's put the drum on, if we can. Yeah, see, it won't even go on there, which means that my shoes are out too far. There we go. It goes on there, but it's pretty tight. You can hear it rubbing a little bit, so I'm going to back it off just a little more. Now that I've got everything put together, it's about time to test. But before I can test this, I've got to bleed the brakes back here because I put that new brake cylinder in. So when I disconnected the brake line, some air could have got in there, and I just need to bleed that out to make sure there's no air in the system. Now I'm going to have a video on exactly how to bleed brakes using speed bleeders coming up. So you don't want to miss that. There we go. It won't turn it off. Fantastic. Now that I have the brake shoes, brake drums, and brake hardware on both of the rear wheels replaced, as well as the parking brake cables, the last thing to do is to adjust this parking brake assembly here so that when I put on the parking brake, the wheels won't turn. And to do that, I'm going to tighten this nut right here, just to the point where these are good and tight. And make sure that with the parking brake off, my rear wheels still turn freely. And then, obviously, when the parking brake is on, they shouldn't turn at all. So we'll see if we can get there. Okay, so it's fairly tight. Let's see if I can turn this wheel. And I can. So let's go a little tighter. Okay, now that's pretty tight. Let's see what we're doing here. Okay, I can still move the wheel pretty freely, but let's hit the parking brake and see what happens. Oh, wow, yeah, that's really tight. Actually, that may actually be a little bit too tight because that parking brake doesn't go down all the way. But that wheel didn't move at all. So let's loosen this up just a little bit. I think we have it. So, ladies and gentlemen, I do believe that I can claim success and say that at least in this case, I'm not as big of an idiot as I could be. So, brakes are off. Wheel turns. Get my one-man handy brake pushing stick. Wheel doesn't turn. But here's the test. Because what I was really trying to fix was my parking brake. Okay, doesn't turn, but last time I showed you this, I used a breaker bar. Let's see if it turns with the breaker bar. Yeah. Now that should hold the truck on a hill. But I'm not going to know for 100% certain until I finish the front brakes and actually take it out for a drive. But that's the next episode. So make sure you stay tuned. Guys, if you learned something, if you enjoyed the video, if you had a good time, if I entertained you at least a little bit, give me a like. If you want to see what's going to happen for the truck in the future, the front brakes, all about the speed bleeders, eventually I'm going to get to the engine, make sure you subscribe so you can see what I'm doing. As always, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, gripes, internet ramblings, stick them below. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time in part 3.